So here's an observation I've made in relation to the relapse cycle that many of us fall prey to. Now, this isn't going to be a surface level conversation regarding some of the, the obvious acts of transmutation to get out of those emotionally compromised positions, like just drop and do 100 push-ups when you feel horny, or just take a cold shower when you get the urge, or go for a walk, or listen to music, or any other variation of what I've spoken about thus far. Because many of my clients have reported, despite all these outlets and all these opportunities to move that negative, or I wouldn't call it negative, but let's say the energy of desire, to move out of that energy of the desire, they find that typically they've already made the conscious decision in their head to go to some of the illicit websites that, again, aren't conducive to our well-being in the future. So typically we've already made the decision whether or not we're going to fall back into old habits before even considering going through some of those avenues before. But I have, I wouldn't say I've invented it, but I have come across a particular technique that can be powerful, because often what happens is, when we experience that heavy emotion of desire, of wanting, of lust, whatever you want to call it, we fall into these strong neurological grooves that have already been determined through the PMO cycle. So what we have to do is we have to recognize that these pathways in our neurochemistry have been so ingrained, so deeply rooted in our system, that when that emotional trigger comes, we follow the path of least resistance. It's easy to slip into old habits, is basically what I'm saying. So what we need to do is we need to recognize that if we don't give our neurology another pathway, then we're just going to fall into these old habits. So here's what you do. So when you're thinking about going through the cycle of PMO, you need to construct a new neural pathway and install and create a new behavior, a new avenue for habit. And if you have a surface level or superficial understanding of neurochemistry, behavior, and habit acquisition, then this should hopefully be fairly simple. So here's what you need to do. There is a room where you live, in your house, in your flat, in your parents' house, whatever, and a location where you typically relapse. It might be your bedroom, it might be your office, it might be your study, it might be sneaking off to the bathroom if you're in a relationship, or if you have a wife, where you do said deed. And what you're going to do is you're going to go to this place voluntarily when you're not in that emotionally compromised situation, okay, where you're relatively at peace and not in the emotion of desire or lust or longing. And what you're going to do, you're going to create the environmental cues that facilitate that kind of behavior. So you're going to take your devices, you might take your phone, you might take your laptop, whatever you typically do when you go through that relapse cycle. Now, what you'll notice is maybe your vulnerability at this point. This is a familiar setting, you've been in it before, and if you're committed to this journey, this is an environment you don't want to be in. But do not fret. So we create the environmental factors for that those particular actions and habits. But this time, you're going to go a different way about it. It might be that once you're in that setting, you vocally express, or you might say it in your head, no, I'm not going to relapse. No, I'm not going to fall back into old habits. Porn is for cucks. I don't know, some abbreviation, some amalgamation of the previous phrases that communicate to yourself and your subconscious that this is a behavior that you're no longer consistent or congruent with. Okay. Now, what's really important when you do this is that you do it at least 10 times, even more if possible. In fact, I find that the more you do this, the stronger you ingratiate those neural connections into your mind, to your neurochemistry. So what you're doing here is a form of rewiring. What you're doing here is you're giving yourself a new suggestion. And what you will find that in moments of duress, in moments of weakness where your defenses are down and you go through the usual cycles, you get into that environment. You have a choice now. You have a choice of going through the well-lubricated PMO cycle, which again, I can't concede has strong neural roots. But it's also very, very, what would you say, comforting, is there's this other avenue now. There's this other behavior that you have some kind of relation with in respects to what happens next. You have a choice. Okay, because the more and more you go through that particular practice, like I've mentioned, the stronger and stronger you're building those neural pathways. Joseph Dispenza very eloquently put, nerves that fire together wire together. So once you go through this thought process and then you marry that thought process with action, going back to that place, but actually giving yourself a different option, a different habit, a different action, a different routine, you will find that that behavior is easier to execute on because you have experience with it. You have the repetitions of it. Let me put things a different way. For example, say you go to the gym tomorrow morning, right? It's Thursday. Tomorrow I'm going to do some legs, okay? I'm going to do some squats with my leg, in my exercise program. Now, I'm very, very good at squatting because I've done thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of repetitions of squatting. My body knows that movement very, very well. In fact, I don't need to really allocate a lot of mental energy to going through that movement pattern. In fact, every time I go to a squat rack, my body gets into position. I know where to position the barbell on my traps. I know I need to engage my glutes, my quads, a little bit of activation in the hamstring. I need to feel my feet, the ground beneath my feet. And I just execute. I execute on that movement. So what I'm trying to tell you is that I have a very, very strong neural connection, a neural pathway with that particular habit. But I didn't when I started. When I was a measly 9 stone soaking wet when I left secondary school, high school for you Americans watching, I'd never squatted before in my life. I didn't have a reference point for squatting. It was awkward. It was clunky. It wasn't fluid. But I gave myself more reference points. I built more repetitions. So I hope I'm conveying my point, intelligently, at least concisely, at least, clearly enough for you to hopefully understand that a lot of our failures can, just because we don't have another choice, we don't have a reference point for what can happen next. We typically think, oh, I feel this particular feeling, I execute on this particular habit. Okay, and this happens in so many different scenarios. You smell, some pizza, you order a pizza, you eat the pizza. There's been no other scenario where you've smelt pizza and thrown the pizza away. Why on earth would you do that? It doesn't make any sense because you've never been through that behavior before. So try it out. If you are again struggling on this journey, this is a really, really interesting psychological tip that can kind of cue up the behavior that we want to see and mitigate the behavior that we would not like to see. So if you find this valuable, let me know what your experience is with maybe doing any kind of affiliation with something like that. Then let me know and I will talk to you again very, very soon. Take care.